Hello and welcome to This World. My name is Vikram Chandra, and on this program we keep you posted on the week's biggest stories from around this world. This week, all eyes were supposed to be on the Quad, the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, a strategic security dialogue between Australia, India, Japan and the United States of America. The Quad Summit was to take place in Sydney, but things changed overnight. Joe Biden, the American president, pulled out of this event and the summit has been cancelled. Why? What's the story here? We'll bring you all the details on our cover story tonight. Also on the program, we're going to be talking about Pakistan. The nation has been grabbing eyeballs throughout the week, throughout the month, throughout the year, and for all the wrong reasons. What was it this time? On the 9th of May 2023, the Pakistan police arrested Imran Khan. His arrest was no less than a high-voltage drama. What are the latest developments and how are things looking for Pakistan? We're going to be telling you more about that on this show. Also, as voices against artificial intelligence are growing across the globe, Italy is all set to invest a whopping 30 million euros to tackle AI. This comes as an attempt to protect employees from a replacement threat. So they're not going to be outright banning it. They're going to try and compensate people whose jobs are being taken away by AI. An interesting possible path in handling AI. We're going to get you details on that as well on this particular program. But let's start by taking a look at the Quad. Next week, the Quad Summit was to take place in Sydney. It was scheduled on the 24th of May. This was the first time that Australia was hosting the event. But things changed at the 11th hour, putting an end to weeks of preparation and months of international deliberation, where Australia alone had allocated a budget of $23 million to organize this conference. Why did this happen? Well, earlier this week, news made headlines. What did it say? American President Joe Biden has cancelled his visit to Australia for the Quad. And in a few hours after a lot of speculation, the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said the Quad Summit would not proceed in Sydney next week without the American President Joe Biden. And hence, the Quad Summit 2023 stands cancelled. In fact, it's not just Australia. The American president has also cancelled his visit to Papua New Guinea. What's all of this for? Well, essentially to deal with issues back home. Biden had to cancel his visit to cater to domestic issues related to the debt ceiling. And I want to talk about that for a couple of minutes. What exactly is this entire debt ceiling issue that seems to be derailing international diplomacy? Well, to put things into perspective, let's first start by understanding what is a debt ceiling. Well, essentially, the debt ceiling refers to the limit that has been placed by the US Congress, American Parliament in other words, on the amount of debt that the American government can accrue. In other words, it's the maximum amount of money which the federal government is allowed to use to cover its bills. This allowance is given by Congress. Why is this allowance needed? Well, essentially because the government spends more money than it ends up collecting in the form of taxes. That happens everywhere. But in America, that debt is shooting up and up and up. Any government needs debt to cover its expenses. But what's happening in America is every time that debt ceiling has to be raised, it leads to tamasha, it leads to drama, it leads to lots and lots of negotiation and considerable walking on a tightrope. Now, currently, the Biden administration wants to raise the U.S. debt ceiling. The Democrats are vouching for it, but the Republicans are against it. And since they have a majority in the House, they've refused to raise the debt ceiling. So until a common consensus is reached, this domestic dysfunction is likely to stay. By the way, this happens every time. This is where the bargaining comes up. You have the party which is not in power saying, we're not going to increase the debt ceiling unless and until you agree to our demands. So it's not new, but it is a tightrope walk. Because what happens if Washington fails to reach a mutual agreement? This could lead to the first ever US default. The US government may run out of its money to pay its obligations, and that could happen as early as June the 1st. Now, the 1st of June also happens to be the deadline to raise the debt ceiling. If nothing is sorted out, then America could hit a constitutional crisis. It could have obviously suffered a massive financial and economic loss. America's gross domestic product would drop by 4%. Even a brief default could lead to a loss of 2 million jobs. Overall, a default could push for higher borrowing costs. Now, interestingly, while Biden has pulled out of the Quad meeting and Papua New Guinea, he is still attending the G7 summit in Japan. Now, if the issues back home were so severe that he abandoned Quad and he abandoned Papua New Guinea, why is he still traveling to Japan? Is G7 more important than the Quad? Now, there is no doubt about the fact that the G7 is a big forum. But Quad has its own significance, especially with Washington and Beijing and their growing differences. So the cancellation of the Quad does send a certain message, and it doesn't necessarily bode very well for the Indo-Pacific. To get a perspective on what exactly is happening in and around the Quad and what the events of this week actually mean, let's speak to Alexander Downer, Australia's longest-serving foreign minister, and therefore it's a real pleasure to get a chance to speak to him. Mr. Downer, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, I'm sure there must be a sense of some disappointment in Australia that the entire Quad had to be cancelled, and cancelled in a rather dramatic last-minute manner.
Yeah, there's no doubt. There's no doubt about that. It was very disappointing that President Biden decided to stay in Washington to deal with the budget deadlock that they have there, and then, of course, the other leaders, with the exception of Prime Minister Modi, were not going to come to Australia. So, look, for the Quad, this is a setback.
Looking at the importance of Quad specifically from an Australian point of view, from the time when you were the foreign minister, you were the longest-running foreign minister, has Australia itself made a fairly definite shift now in its thinking, recognizing that China poses a certain sort of a challenge and a certain sort of a threat, and therefore steps are going to have to be taken to confront that and to find as many partners as possible?
China just needs to understand that it doesn't have free rein in the Indo-Pacific region to change the status quo through the use of force. And that the Indo-Pacific needs to be a zone of peace, an area of peaceful coexistence and common exchange. So I think the Quad is a really important message that we send to China, but more broadly to the world.
If you just look at a map of the Indian Ocean and this entire part of the world, it's very clear how defense cooperation could actually be happening between India and Australia. I mean, if you look at there's the Andaman Islands, which is obviously Indian, and then you've got Christmas Island and others which are Australian down there. If India and Australia were to work in a very strategic manner, they'd pretty much be controlling the entire access to the Indian Ocean. Is that the sort of thinking now you think, far more closely knit defense cooperation? India has not traditionally been part of any military alliances, but do you think that's the sort of thinking that is increasingly taking ground now?
You quite rightly point to the geographical significance of our two countries to the Indian Ocean. That means that through collaboration, through our militaries, particularly our navies, increasingly getting to know each other, working together, understanding each other's doctrines, that we can send a very strong message to the region. And I think Prime Minister Modi's visit to Australia will help to reinforce that.
All right, Mr. Downer, thank you so much for joining us. And let's see what emerges concretely from those meetings that the Prime Minister Modi is going to be happening in Australia. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm sure they'll be very successful.
Thank you so much. Right, our next story is from Pakistan. It's a story that took the entire country by storm. People were on the streets, protests broke out across the nation, and various parts of the country were quite literally on fire. It all began with the arrest of Imran Khan, the former Prime Minister of Pakistan, and of course a global cricket star. Let's get you the background.
The 9th of May 2023, The Shehbaz Sharif government orders the arrest of former Prime Minister Imran Khan. He's picked up from the Islamabad High Court, not by the police, but by paramilitary forces. Khan was seen being forcefully taken into a van. What was Imran Khan doing at Islamabad High Court? He had gone to file a bail application in 7 cases. Imran Khan faces over 140 cases, ranging from provoking violence to murder to blasphemy. What happens next? Khan is taken into the custody of NAB, or the National Accountability Bureau of Pakistan. This time, Khan is charged with corruption. The story also involves his wife, Bushra Bibi. It is the Al-Qadir University Trust case, the very trust that was set up to impart quality education but ended up facing an inquiry for property settlement, which caused a loss of 190 million British pounds. Not only this, in this very case, Khan is also accused of getting 458 canals of land in his trust's name by misusing power. The long-pending inquiry has now resulted in his arrest. But this does not go down well with Imran Khan's party members. They call the arrest a kidnap. They name it illegal. In fact, every citizen who supports him is outraged. A massive uproar rings out across the country. Lahore, Karachi, Multan, Peshawar and Quetta, all these cities are filled with protesters. Everyone demands that the judiciary intervene. 24 hours after his arrest, another case against Imran Khan. Again, this case involves his wife, Bushra Bibi. It's called the Tosha Khana case. Khan is accused of buying precious state gifts from the treasury at cheap prices and selling them to foreign businessmen through his wife's contacts. These state gifts include gold-plated pens, expensive watches and jewelry. Khan's supporters run riot. Women are seen coming out onto the streets to protest. Violence and vandalism rages. Schools are shut, communication links are cut off, and internet services are suspended in large parts of the country. The blame game begins. The Pakistani establishment blames Imran Khan and his party PTI for pushing the country into deep layers of anarchy. PTI blames the army and government for framing Imran Khan. The protesters storm the house of a Lahore Corps commander, and they make sure they don't leave empty-handed. Various items including Coca-Cola, chicken korma, a peacock are taken along. The situation gets so bad that the office of Radio Pakistan in Peshawar is set ablaze. Offices of the Associated Press are also attacked. The protesters are arrested on grounds of arson and clashing with police officials. On the 12th of May, Khan is granted interim bail. His bail has been extended now till the 8th of June. But has the situation improved? Perhaps not. The high-voltage drama continues in Pakistan. Imran Khan has now been accused of sheltering protesters in his house, the very protesters who took the country by storm on the 9th of May. He's been accused of harboring terrorists against his own country. It doesn't stop there. In recent developments, protesters have been accused of attacking army safe houses. But the catch here is only army officers are aware of these safe houses. As a result, a significant question is being raised. Are top officers of the ISI behind the mobs? Some of the parliamentarians from Imran Khan's party are threatening to resign. This is because they are taken aback by their leader's decisions. In response, Khan has released a video address. It was aired on the PTI's official Twitter handle. Khan alleged that the protests of May 9th are part of an internationally organized conspiracy. Countries are demanding Pakistan adhere to its constitution and abide by rule of law. In fact, as many as 65 US lawmakers have signed a bipartisan letter urging the Secretary of State to quote-unquote prioritize the promotion and protection of democracy and human rights in Pakistan.
So what can be done, if anything, to de-escalate Pakistan's political chaos and unrest? Let me put that question to Adnan Kaiser, who's a foreign affairs expert. He was also formerly commissioned as an officer in the Pakistani army. Mr. Kaiser, thank you so much for joining us. It looks to be, we've been talking about the chaos in Pakistan now for months altogether. Doesn't seem like getting any better. How do you see this present crisis shaping up?
Well, thank you very much first for having me at your channel. It's always a privilege to be at your channel. And good evening to all your viewers. So first of all, we have to understand what is happening in Pakistan in the historical backdrop. This is kind of a democratic awakening. It can be seen as similar to the Arab Spring, which happened in 2011 in the Middle East, as well as in the 2019 protests, which took place in Lebanon, Iraq, and Algeria. So there is because of social media awakening and other things. So Pakistani people have risen up. First of all, is that the Pakistan's constitution is feudalistic in nature. So it has been favoring the politicians who had been carrying out loot and plunder of the state resources for the past about 75 years. So this is one. Secondly, our judicial system, it is still continuing of the colonial system. This is second. So Pakistani people are not getting relief from these two things. The other thing which we must understand is that, whether we like it or not, Pakistan Army has played a very fundamental role in the politics of the country.
That role which you're talking about, one of the big concerns that many people are having is, as the instability continues, as the rioting happens, if further attacks actually take place in the manner that they have, at what point is the army going to say, okay, enough is enough, and we'll step in once again? It's happened often enough in Pakistan's history in the past.
Army is not going to step in this time because the situation has fundamentally changed. So army has been carrying out the hybrid form of governance in the country. In the past, they had been carrying out controlled or guided democracy during President Ayub Khan and during Ziaul Haq and General Musharraf. So unfortunately, Pakistan Army is not, or fortunately, is not going to step in and take power. But again, there is a strong consideration that Mr. Imran Khan is going to be eliminated. And the moment he is eliminated from the politics, then the PTI will disintegrate. As soon as PTI gets disintegrated, then everything will die down.
All right, Mr. Kaiser, the chaos will continue for the foreseeable future. Thank you so much for joining us with that.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
For our final story, let's take you to Italy. The story is about artificial intelligence, or AI, something that we've kept you updated about week after week after week. AI is increasingly making its presence felt in our lives. It brings with it a mix of risks and opportunities. But along with those opportunities, voices are talking about the threats that AI brings along. Not just the existential threats like human extinction, but also the risks around jobs and livelihood. Let's just understand what this is all about. AI is going to bring with it the most dramatic surge in productivity. Human prosperity is likely to rise very sharply as a result of AI. People will be doing their jobs in a far more productive manner, or AI will be doing a lot of those tasks for it. But the challenge is going to be that with that surge in productivity, a lot of people are going to find themselves without a job, or they're going to have to reskill themselves. There are entire segments of the economy where people are working right now, humans are working right now, but those jobs can be done by AI. How do you deal with that situation? How do you compensate the people who are going to be unemployed? How do you balance the benefits of AI from the challenges that are being posed to those who are affected by it? Those are questions that all of us are asking. Some people say, oh, let's regulate AI, let's ban AI. Well, Italy might have an answer, and it's a slightly different answer from the regulate artificial intelligence that was its first response. Italy has allocated 30 million euros to help those whose jobs are at risk from artificial intelligence. Yes, you heard that right. These funds are to be allocated in two ways. A third of these funds will go towards helping people in high-risk replacement jobs, and the rest is aimed at training the unemployed, skilling them in other words. It also aims at helping the economically inactive to acquire new skills. In 2021, an agency had been set up by the Italian government to increase the digital skills of its citizens. It's called Fondo pela Repubblica Digital, or FRD. And it has a long list of sectors that are most at risk from AI: transportation and logistics, office support, administration, some areas in manufacturing and retail, to name just a few. Now, the world over, experts have time and again said that new regulations and new economic systems are needed to govern the world that we're heading towards, a world where AI is going to be playing a particularly important role and a potentially massive role on jobs. Now, Italy is pointing to a slightly different direction. Don't just ban things. Try and put up a cushion. Try and set up a cushion. Have a safety net for those who could be affected by AI. Should other countries follow suit? And if so, what are the possible things that they should consider? And to understand what the next steps in all of this can be, great to be joined by Mark Oxenberg, who's joining us from Vienna. He's a professor of philosophy of media and technology at the University of Vienna. Mark's authored more than 15 books on the subject of AI. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. Just to understand, one of the big concerns when it comes to AI, you have the existential threats of AI wiping out everybody, but job loss and what could happen as a result of that and what that means for the human species. Is that what you think is the problem that will almost certainly come, and therefore we have to find answers to it?
It's absolutely a problem that will come. It's not going to be a disaster in the sense that we will lose half of the jobs, as has been predicted at some point by a famous study. I think that's really panic making. But I think we need to prepare our economies, societies for some transformations in the job market.
What we've just seen Italy doing, for example, is one of the first. There are two ways of doing this. You can either say, I'm going to ban AI, and that's probably going to be tough to manage and probably unachievable at the best of times. Italy seems to be taking a slightly different route to say, okay, we're going to start setting aside money to compensate people or to reskill people or to retrain people whose jobs are being affected by AI. Is that the path that everyone should start thinking about?
Yeah, I think the second part is much better. I think banning is not a solution. Regulation is better. And when it comes to preparing for the near future effects on the job market, to set aside money, to also look at our social security systems, if they are resilient enough for these changes, I think that's something that totally makes sense at the moment.
Professor Oxenberg, I think we're going to keep coming back to you in the months and years ahead as we try and figure out the correct path to move forward in these fields. Thank you so much for joining us from Vienna.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, the questions around AI, they're not going to go away anywhere in a hurry, but what I can tell you is we'll continue to track that entire story or this inflection point that the planet seems to be on, and we'll keep talking about it on This World because it's an important part of what this world is going to be in the years ahead. That's it for this week's episode. We'll see you next week with a fresh lineup of guests. My name is Vikram Chandra, and you're watching This World on WION. World is One.